I'm Will Sumners from Echo Legal Automation, introducing today an interview we shot recently with Mark Ford. Mark Ford is the Chief Knowledge Officer of Baker McKenzie and formerly the Director of Knowledge Management at Clifford Chance. He's got 20 years of experience in working with document assembly and Contract Express, so really one of the most experienced people in the field out there. So for organisations that haven't gone down the document assembly route yet, this can all be rather intimidating. The most obvious question I think people have is, where do I start?
I think the first thing I'd say is to start simple. Start with a manageable document and don't tackle your biggest, most complex document first. Second, I'd say look for high usage, so documents that you're using a lot, where even a small benefit is going to be multiplied over multiple uses. Thirdly, I'd say don't go too far. A common mistake people make is to try and automate every option within a document, but I think it's better to aim to get a good first draft completed rather than to automate everything within the document. Fourth, I'd say try to keep the impact of each question high. So ideally, what I think you want is a manageable number of questions that have a big impact, ideally hundreds of changes throughout the document. And last but not least, I'd say work with your champions. It's really important in practice to have support from the business, so focus on those areas where your document owners are willing to invest time and effort in the initiative.
Like any other kind of change project, this is going to cause a lot of disruption in the organisation and require a lot of resources. How do you measure success against this kind of investment?
My advice is at the start of a project to set baseline metrics so you can measure the time it takes to produce documents before and after automation. Measuring the cost, again before and after, relatively straightforward too, although you have to make some assumptions. And then also looking at the quality and the risk aspects. And I think the way to do that is to assess the differences between the different versions as you go through the automation process. As you're consolidating and reviewing the different versions, then look at the differences between them, and that will give you a sense of how much of an improvement you're making to the quality.
And how have you captured this kind of data in the past?
I think there's a number of ways that you need to approach that. You can certainly use metrics from within Contract Express itself. So of course that will tell you who's used the tool and how often they've used it and on which documents. But I think inevitably there is an element of manual tracking that you'll need to figure out how long it took, what the cost was before automation and after automation.
Perhaps it's a more relevant question for law firms, but how do you get people to agree what the wording should be for these contracts?
In an ideal world, I guess you've got a single document owner who can just make a call about what the wording should be. But in practice, what very often happens is that you end up with multiple owners, each with a slightly different variation of the document, or all owning and maintaining their own versions. And the only practical way forward in that situation is to get them all together and persuade them to negotiate with each other and really agree a definitive set of wording for that particular agreement.
Have you ever seen a project where automation of different wording styles has worked out?
I think the short answer to that is probably no. Variation in wording that is purely stylistic it is probably not a good idea because your documents are going to diverge. That's going to increase the risk to your organisation. It's going to result in inconsistent documents of varying quality. So I'd say variation for stylistic reasons, probably a bad idea, but of course you have to take account of legal and market practice differences.
So fast forward, we have our target set, our documents automated. How do you go about launching this?
I think the first thing I'd say is that it's important to identify a senior sponsor because this sort of initiative really does need support from the top if it's to succeed. Now, if you're a very top-down organisation, then maybe just sending an email will be enough. But in my experience, change management is usually harder than that. So my advice would be to look at the benefits and consider them from the user's perspective. For example, if one of your goals is to save drafting time, from a management perspective, that's a great thing, but some users might perceive it as a threat because they might be thinking the machines are coming for their jobs. So in that situation, I'd say you should consider how you can reassure your users and explain to them the goal is actually to take the basic drafting off their plates, to free up their time so that they can then focus on the more complex work.